This is the Motivated Business Show, hosted by me, Mark Terrell, the author of Motivated, the Reluctant Leader's Guide to Building a Business that Sets You Free. In my book, I share the 7-step process to get the measure of your business. M.E.A.S.U.R.E is an acronym that stands for Mirror, Evaluate, Action, Systemize, Unify, Review, and Energize. On each episode, I'll be chatting to a business owner about how they stay motivated and how they've got the measure of their business. So without further ado, let's find out who's joining me on this episode. Hello and welcome to this edition of the Motivated Business Show with me, Mark Terrell. My guest today, we're both going to try and to send you to sleep, but hopefully not during the show. And more about that shortly. Just before we get stuck into the topic and I introduce my guest, just a few things that I want to draw your attention to. Firstly, is my book. I'll be referring to the 7-step process that I wrote about in the book later on in the podcast. So if you want to learn more about that, the 7 steps are covered in 7 chapters, and then there's 2 bonus chapters, which are quite important. And we were touching on one of those chapters today because of the importance of looking after yourself. So if you'd like a copy of that, you can get it directly from me, or you can buy it from Amazon on Kindle or in paperback form. Another way you can get it is to buy me a couple of coffees. So if you buy me 2 coffees, which you can do by using that link, or you might find it in the comments, click through, buy me 2 coffees. I'm happy to send you a book as a thank you. And also, if you just want to buy me 1 coffee, that helps to keep the show on the road with regards to the podcast, because we don't have a sponsor. And so any contributions are gratefully received. Right, with that out of the way, let's bring on today's guest. Welcome, Giles.
Hi there.
Good to see you this morning. We've had a few technical challenges, but we are here now, so hopefully it'll all be good. Right, Giles, just before we crack on, I just want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself properly. Let's do that first.
Well, Mark, really pleased to be here, and hi to everyone who's tuned in. I'm a business leader who had a sleep problem, like many business leaders, and it was quite severe for about more than a decade, and I solved that problem, basically ended up writing a book about it. My corporate life spread over about 30 years, having graduated from University of Bristol, and I'm now back in Bristol, which is great, having lived in 7 countries and worked in about 70 over a period of about 30 years. I worked in the oil industry, in consulting, with textiles as well for some large organizations, and lived in quite a few different countries in sales, marketing, oil trading, learning and development, and then general management. I've always had a passion for leadership and development, and so in the last nearly 10 years I've basically been freelance consulting and coaching in that area, and one of my specialisms is around sleep and leaders and sleep, because big problem I had and problem I see and hear about quite a lot.
Brilliant, yeah. No, I think it's a really important thing. I touched with it with the 9 chapters. 1 chapter I talk about looking after yourself, and I touch on sleep as being a really important thing you should pay attention to. And it was interesting, the other day I saw someone on LinkedIn. She was a leadership, she works in the leadership space, and she put a poll out asking whether it was appropriate for her to mention sleep as a topic, or should she keep on track to her normal message. And I thought it was an interesting thing that she had to almost ask permission whether sleeping was an appropriate thing to be talking about. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's because it's associated with intimacy and marriage and other such things that people sometimes feel a bit nervous to talk about it. Mm-hmm. However, statistics like that 1 in 4 married couples, it would seem, certainly in the US, actually sleep in separate rooms because of issues like snoring and restless leg syndrome and other such things, and people having very different nocturnal habits. Some people wanted to sleep early and others wanted to sleep late. Mm-hmm. The more that sort of thing is talked about, I think probably the more people start to be a bit more relaxed about talking about their sleep. And of course, I think it used to be a badge of honor years ago to sort of say, I've just flown in on the red eye from somewhere and haven't had any sleep and I'm going to power through for the day and stuff like that. But most people, I think, have realized that that's a bit daft.
Yeah.
It's not good for you, and it's not good for people around you. So
Yeah. I suppose the first thing we should touch on is the importance of sleep, why we should be concerned about it.
yeah, basically, Positive Sleep is the name of the book that I wrote, and the
Copy here.
yeah, that's the first edition. Actually, got a
Yeah.
second edition out as well now, Mark.
Yeah.
Just
We'll ask. Yeah, I want to find out what's in the updated version, but we'll get to that.
um, uh, and well, basically, we all perform better when we slept better. And in the case of a leader, that's a lot to do with concentration. It's to do with their ability to focus on other people's interests and needs. It's their ability to both deal with things at a very sort of helicopter level, and also then dive down to the minutiae when they need to, when there's a fire or something they need to pay real close attention to. It's that kind of stuff that goes out of the window when you don't sleep properly. And I think rapport building is so much around actually hearing what people say, not just the words, but the actual meaning of what they say. And when you've slept poorly, that tends to be a skill that gets dialed down. And I often say that if our leaders slept really well across the board in the UK, for example, all the money being spent on employee engagement could be spent on something else,
Yeah.
because probably they'd just build better rapport and engage better with their teams because they'd listen to them better, and they wouldn't have so many issues around employee engagement. So, which is a massive problem particularly in larger organisations.
Indeed, yeah, yeah. There's Margaret Thatcher comes to mind with regards to someone who was known to have a very well, apparently not that much of a need for sleep. So I think they talked about 3 or 4 hours a night was what she needed. But whether that's actually true or not, I'm not sure.
There are a number of people who have claimed that. I think most of them have died from Alzheimer's. And there does seem to be a correlation between poor sleep and a risk of Alzheimer's. There's a great TED talk by a guy called Jeff Iliff, Illif, I think it is, which is all about that. And it's not completely nailed down and proven, but there's an awful lot of evidence that now points to that. So the research that's been done tends to point to a sort of normal distribution around sleep. So there are a couple of people, less than 3% of the population, that probably can survive on less than 6 hours sleep and thrive on it, and another small percentage of the population that probably need more than 9 hours.
Yeah.
But somewhere between 6 and 9 is what most people seem to need, and that's why the sort of 7.5 to 8 hour average is what's often quoted.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking to someone actually. I think it was just last week or in the last fortnight anyway, and she was saying that she didn't sleep much, but she also told me that she basically lived on caffeine. So the link between caffeine and the ability to sleep is quite a well-known fact, isn't it? It disrupts
Yeah,
your ability to sleep, I think. Is that right?
yeah, because there's two things that basically help us sleep at night, or two forces, if you like, that are working throughout the day. And one of them is around sleep pressure, if you like. Pardon me. And basically, what happens when you take caffeine in is you're basically dampening down one of the systems that is prompting you to sleep. So, and you can. So that's one of the reasons why certainly I and many other people say that there's quite a good point. It's good to have a cut-off point for caffeine in your day. Now, in my case, I try and say, right, 12 o'clock, I'm not going to have a coffee after that, unless I think I need it because I'm feeling a bit tired and I've got a later meeting or something. So I might deliberately do it. But
Yeah.
as a force of habit, I don't have caffeine after 12 o'clock. And caffeine, of course, is in green tea, for example. There's a number of things caffeine appears in that people don't think about. It's not just your regular coffee or tea.
I mean, chocolate, I think, isn't there?
Chocolate and
Yeah.
ice cream, and quite Red Bull, obviously. There's quite a few things. It's just, I think it's not about saying, I mean, I had 7 years where I had no caffeine at all. I just decided to cut it out when I had a serious sleep problem, and as a way to find out what was going to help me. However, I don't think that's necessary for most people. It's just be mindful of when you're having it and think about other things you could have instead.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just reflecting on my sort of sleep. I tend to sleep quite well now. But if I do have an occasion when I don't sleep well, it's not that I have any problem going to sleep. Apparently, from my partner, she tells me that I'm uh, uh, often asleep while she's still talking to me. We won't say too much about that. But I'm sort of person that sort of wakes up that sort of 3 o'clock time, like 4 hours after going to bed. So that I've read that's quite common, isn't it?
It is supposed to be the most common form of insomnia, maintenance insomnia, where basically you've got off to sleep and you've probably had 2 or 3 sleep cycles, three to 4.5 hours. You've slept pretty well, and then suddenly you wake up. And for various reasons, and even certainly in the Chinese calendar and the Chinese view of the world, in their medical practices, they have some explanations for this as well. So it's not a new phenomena, as it were. It's something that's been thought about for thousands of years. 3 a.m. seems to be the catastrophizing time for most of us. So a problem that you think about at 3 a.m. is 10 or 20 times or maybe 100 times more significant at 3 a.m. than it is at 9 a.m.
Right.
So for a lot of people, they'll wake up, something may have prompted it, or as soon as they wake up, they suddenly think about some issue that at that point seems enormous,
Yeah.
and then they struggle to get back to sleep. So this was certainly my problem. I was going to bed even before 9 o'clock sometimes because I was sort of struggling to sleep, and then I would be wide awake at 3 a.m. and not go back to sleep. And one of the ways I addressed it, which I mentioned in the book quite early on, is this thing called body scanning, which is a mindfulness technique which actually goes back hundreds of years. It's just been rebranded in sort of the world of the 21st century discussion world of mindfulness, which is literally scanning your body from your head to your toe and vice versa very slowly, and focusing on each part of your body very, very slowly. And if you do that regularly, you can do it lying, your partner wouldn't be complaining about that because she'd be fast asleep and you'd just be lying there doing it, sort of thing. So, but if you do that consistently, and what will happen is for most people is they'll suddenly think about the fact they need to do the M.E.A.S.U.R.E or something will come into their brain and they'll be distracted. If you can bring yourself back to wherever it was, I got to my nose, I got to my feet, or I got to my ear, or wherever it was, what normally happens is that people either they do it regularly and they practice night after night. They'll either find they start nodding off, or they don't nod off, but they get into quite a nice state, like a sort of Zen-like state, where they just almost like a bit of a trance. Because what are you trying to do when you're going to go to sleep? You're trying to relax the body and quieten the mind. Those are the two key things. And so in this case, often it's the quietening of the mind that is the challenge when you've woken up.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just thinking back to my retail days when I used to have a particularly busy time, up early, and I had to sort of stay on because, things happened, staff didn't turn up, had to carry on and when I thought I was going home. And sometimes I would shut the door in the office and just basically just like lose myself. And so I suppose you could call that having a sort of a crafty nap. What's your views on having a crafty nap in the afternoons?
I've always been in favour of naps, and that's probably because I was brought up in a family where napping was normal.
Yeah.
My mum was a homemaker. My dad worked full time. I didn't actually really quite realise it looking back on it, but he actually worked shifts. He worked in the electrical supply industry and at power stations, and often he ended up having to work shifts, even though he was a sort of a manager of the certain section for the sort of first few years of my life, anyway. And the result was that he often would find needs for a nap or a nap at the weekend, and my mum often had a nap after lunch. So we were kind of brought up that was quite normal. And as there are with most things around sleep, there are quite strong views in different camps on this subject, and you will read other probably better known sleep writers than me that will say never have a nap, it will interfere with your sleep. My experience, and again it's what I've read about, is that if you have a nap before, I say, about 3 p.m. for most people, you should be all right.
Yeah.
And it falls into two categories. There's the power nap and the longer full sleep cycle. Power nap up to 20, 25, 30 minutes, sometimes called a nap espresso in Italy. they lie down, they take an espresso, and within half an hour the espresso's kicked in and woken them up again. So
Yeah.
that's I believe that's an Italian, a well recognised phenomena in
Yeah. Yeah.
certain parts of the world. Or the longer nap, which tends to be something you might do at the weekend if you know you're going out late or whatever. And a full
Mm.
sleep cycle tends to be about 90 minutes. So if I lie down at the weekend, or if I've recently had quite bad flu, so if I, if I want to have a nap at the moment, quite often I find I'll sleep up to an hour, hour and a half because I'm a bit low because I'm
Yeah.
just recovering from a cold. So I favour them, Mark, and I
Yeah.
think your tactic was good, and I certainly employed it during my years of really bad sleep. I was a great napper.
Yeah.
However, you will find people, and apparently it's genetically related. There's been research recently that's published suggesting that either can't nap at all
Right.
or feel really groggy afterwards. So obviously, if that's the case, then that's the case. But for those of us that
Yeah.
can, I think it's a great tool to have in the toolbox.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's certain cultures in the world that they shut down for a couple of hours in the afternoon, don't they? In Spain, you have
Yeah.
the siesta. I'm not saying they all go to sleep, but it's definitely a downtime and just recharge before the afternoon sort of kicks off again.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm working like I'm today, I'm not on with clients later in the week for a couple of days, but today I'm sort of doing a few calls and mostly working at home.
Mm.
Then I will normally have a nap at a certain point, but I also know that my best time is probably up to about 1 o'clock, and from 4 till 7ish. So I certainly have times in the afternoon where I'm not quite as um, insightful
Mm.
as I am in the morning, or sort of later in the day. So a lot of people also just know that they have a rhythm,
Yeah.
and that when people talk about time management, increasingly I read that people talk about not so much time management, but sort of energy management. And when is your best time of the day to do certain things,
Mm-hmm.
and just capitalize on that. So yeah, it's an individual thing. However, for most people, it's something that they learn about over time. Because people are different.
Yeah, yeah, and that rhythm's important, isn't it? Because it's only, well, it's not only, but the thing when we are travelling long distance on an aircraft and we talk about jet lag. Essentially, what jet lag is, as far as I understand, is it basically we're disrupting our
Yeah,
circadian rhythm. Is that right?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it takes a while for it to get back into rhythm, and that's why you feel the way you do.
yeah. In theory, it's an hour. It's an hour. It's a day per hour that you've shifted. So if you shift one way, if you shift 5 hours going to the US, it takes you 5 days to recover, and the other way as well.
Right.
Of course, it's more challenging for many people because they go to the US for 4 days, and
Mm.
there's a 5 or 6 hour time difference, so they haven't really got onto the right time zone. And they're coming back again,
Yeah.
and it's the same. It's just as disruptive the other way. Or you might say, um, um, what one is easier than the other. I mean, I certainly found I would get onto it. I found it easier to fly east,
Yeah.
as it were, than west. But that was because I
Yeah.
did a lot more of going east than west. I don't know if that may have been part
Well,
of
I,
it.
I haven't been to the East that much, but I went to Japan last year, and because of the 8 hour difference and it's a 14-hour flight, it's like it's the whole day because the 14 hours plus the eight hours is almost so you get there at the same time as you sort of took off, and then we took off in the evening. So by the time we got there, we just got to the hotel and went to bed. So it seemed to be easier because by the time we got up in the morning, we seemed to feel okay. Whereas going the other way, it seemed more a challenge. But it all depends on the time of the flight, I suppose. There's lots of variables, I guess.
There's lots of tricks that people try. I'm not sure that any of them are that compelling, apart from trying to get into local time as soon as you can in terms of meals and things like that. Don't get dehydrated, so probably best to either just have a glass before you fly, or don't have a glass of wine at all, or champagne, and things like yoga and various relaxation seem to be good. And some people swear by these sort of blue light glasses. I've never used them because I've not done that much flying in the last 10 years like I used to before.
Yeah.
However, that there are glasses you can buy, which I know frequent travellers use and stewards use and people like that to try to get onto. It's supposed to help you adjust quicker,
Yeah.
not just full stop, adjust quicker. And of course, people do use melatonin, which is one of the indicators of the need to sleep to to help them. However, that should be prescribed. It's not a thing that you can really
Yeah.
just go somewhere and buy it and know what to do with it. You've got to know when to take it within the cycle of your day and so forth
Yeah.
to find it helpful. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think people. But as you say, Mark, I mean, you obviously you've touched on it in your own book, and increasingly people are just becoming more mindful of the need to. It's one of those key things that if you want to do have a good life, whether it
Yeah.
be professionally, personally, and so forth, you've got to be mindful of it.
Yeah.
And when I was first got interested in the topic, say 2012, 2013. So little written about it,
Mm.
really, and now it's a proper industry. So
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? I was going to just say the importance of light, isn't it? Because if we're having too much light and we've got an environment where there's light and it's not getting dark, then that disrupts things as well, doesn't it? So being aware of that is important, isn't it?
light's a factor both
Mm.
ways.
Mm.
So actually, early morning light. The late Michael Mosley was a guy that I certainly listened to a lot of his work and enjoyed reading his material as well. And I thought he was quite. I certainly share a number of his opinions around and a number of things around sleep. And certainly he recommends early morning light as a good way to start the day and sort of get our clock into the
Right. Yeah.
kickstart in the way it should be. And light during the day, being able to sit near a window if you're having natural light, if you have to be in an office all day, or actually getting out and getting some light. But equally, as you say, if it's very light at night, late at night, it can affect people's sleep. And of course, that's why blackout blinds and things like this can be very helpful in weather that is not like the weather we've got today.
Indeed, yes. So you mentioned at the beginning there that you've, when I showed the book, that you've updated the book. I'm interested in why did you need to update it? What's in the new edition that wasn't in the original edition?
Well, the first reason was the publisher approached me and said we've sold out the first edition. So that's always nice to hear from a publisher, isn't it? So I had no
Absolutely,
idea
yeah.
we'd sold out.
Congratulations, yeah.
So that was a good piece of news. Then the second thing is that I wanted to add in a chapter about COVID and a little bit of writing near the end about devices and electronics and sleep gadgets, if you like. I've also put in about a dozen new illustrations to try and bring certain points to light because I know for many people seeing things visually
Yeah.
helps along with the words.
Mm-hmm.
And also I've turned it into paperback, which for certain booksellers that often are at airports and stations, you know the one I mean.
Yes.
They tend to prefer paperbacks.
Oh,
So
interesting. Yeah,
it's it's
this
gone
one's
into
quite a hard cover. This one. Yeah.
yeah, I know. So
Yeah.
I'll send you a new one, Mark. It's so you can have a look at it. So that seems to be quite popular. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I did it, and it was good to actually reflect back on it. And I mean, I hadn't read my own book for 3 or 4 years, so it was quite useful to do so. So only 5 years since the one before, and I think that the COVID reflection and discussion was, there's a lot of research that's shown that threw a lot of people's sleep out because they got out of rhythm generally, and a number of people are still struggling, if you like, to get back into some sort of sleep rhythm associated with it. So I wrote a little bit about that and why that might be and so forth. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it seemed like a good time to do it, I think.
It's an interesting thing when you write a book because it's never finished. Because in the way that, well, yeah, if I did it again, what would I add in? I was talking recently about some stuff, and the one thing I'll probably put more in my, if I rewrote my book, is more about nutrition, the importance of nutrition. Again, on the wellness sort of thing, because it's when you start understanding the importance of nutrition, you think, well, actually, this is really makes a massive difference. And so, and it's interesting how those things are always going on with regards to, what would an update look like?
Yeah, and I now I don't know if you know a lady called Laura Wooding, who's in this region anyway. I now do a little bit of work with Laura, both in terms of helping her a bit with her business and also looking at my own nutrition, because I increasingly think that is so linked to how well we sleep and how well we don't sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of looking at that more and more. But you're right. I think it's Bob Dylan that says a song is never finished, is it? And he's always
No.
coming out with versions, which doesn't always make it popular with all his audience, I think. But
Yeah.
I think it's true. I mean, I could go back and change some things and write a different few chapters as well. But it's the latest thinking I had earlier this year when we had to submit the latest drafts. So
Yeah. Yeah.
hope to find something in there.
opportunity was there, so grab it. Okay, Giles, we're getting towards the end of the show, which is a few minutes away. So I'm going to give you the opportunity just to sit back for a couple of minutes. I'm going to share a little bit about the 7-step process and about what we talked about, and then I'll give the opportunity to make some comments after that. So this is the 7-step process I talk about in the book, and the two additional chapters, there's 9 chapters in my book, I talk about enjoying the journey and looking after yourself. So mainly what we've been talking about today is very much about looking after yourself. It's really important. You can't expect to be a good leader or business owner or whatever you associate with being unless you are looking after yourself, and sleep is one thing, nutrition, exercise, and all those things are really important. So I don't really cover them in the 7-step model, but one of the things that I've realized more and more is important is if something is important to you, then you have to systemize it. So that's the systemize there. When I talk about it in the book, it's very much about systemizing the processes in your business with regards to the systemizing as a topic. But really what we're talking about here is systemizing everything. So if you think sleep is important, then make sure you have a system in place to make sure you get good quality sleep, or positive sleep, as Giles says. And if nutrition is important, make sure you eat well and buy good food, and exercise is important. So systemizing is a key thing in life in general, in that yes, I talk a lot about motivation and the reason to do things, but if you don't have systems in place, then you're at the mercy of motivation, which is not what I talk about. It's actually understanding what drives you at work and make sure those things are being fulfilled. But backing that up, you need some systems in place to make sure that you are going to perform at your best. So I'm going to basically leave it at that with regards to what we talked about, because all the other elements are very much around understanding yourself. This is let's go back to understanding yourself here, evaluating your business, where you are, where you want to be, actioning your plan, systemizing, and then the last 3 steps are very much around building a team around you, and that might not necessarily be a team that you employ. It might be a team of VAs and associates that you might have. So I'm going to leave it at that and bring Giles back in for any comments that you might like to make on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it all makes a lot of sense to me. I certainly think the systemization is an interesting one for those of us that are working, maybe running our own businesses, and as you say, don't employ anybody full time, but have, for example, I use a VA and also use an IT support person, 2 key people. But I also think about, well, I've got a personal trainer, and I work with someone on nutrition, and I also work with someone on physio quite regularly because I've had some issues with my back and knee and so actually, when you look around it, there's quite a lot of different people that you work with. I also run with someone regularly, sort of like a running coach in a sense. So there's a number of things like that. So where you use that, and I think certainly I find that as a freelance, having certain things in the diary during the week, like personal trainer, like a game of real tennis, because that's one of my great passions, like running when I run, etc., and having a bit of a structure around that, even if the structure is not always business related structure, because clients can often want to change days and so forth, or times, but putting in sort of exercise structure I find quite helpful, and I've gone back to a very old style daily worksheet with not just tasks but random jottings and all sorts, and I keep a file of that and I look at that every day and come back to that next day. I've tried all sorts of different systems, and I still obviously have diary on my phone like most people, but I actually find that the sheer habit of writing things down for a day and then checking back from previous days and so forth, much more likely to give me the chance to get everything done and also not forget things, because things come in your head. I think, I should do that. I should give that person a call, and making more of a system around that on a sort of daily, weekly, monthly basis does help hugely. I think it sometimes falls slightly into the boring but important category, but it's got to be done.
Yeah, and journaling and gratefulness and all those sort of things, we could always leave them and not do them, but actually when you do them, that's when you really appreciate how powerful they are and how they keep you in a good place. Because sometimes, I think we have a tendency as human beings, I don't know whether it's a brain thing, but we tend to focus on the negative. So we need things in our lives to make sure that we come back to appreciating what's good in our life, and not get obsessed with what's not going well or what's lacking, and appreciating what we do have, and having that at front of mind. Giles, the time has come, unfortunately. Thank you for your time today. I'm glad we got it done in the end. We had a bit of a false start a couple of weeks ago, and today we thought that the tech was going to get in the way again, but no, we got it done. So thank you for your time today. Really enjoyed it, and hopefully if you've been inspired and sleeping hasn't been one of your key focuses, then obviously Giles's book is a great place to start. So thank you for your time, Giles.
Thanks again. Thanks.
There we are. Giles he does lots of things, but he has to focus on making sure that we sleep well, and I'm definitely on board with that, as it's something I touched on in my book, but I have nowhere that I certainly wouldn't describe me as being an expert in it, but it's something that I've read around, and I know how important it is for all of us. Right then, just before we go then, just a reminder, you can get my book from myself directly from my website, or you can buy it from Amazon. And as I mentioned earlier, if you buy me a coffee, that's great. It keeps the show on the road, as it were, with regards to this podcast. And if you buy two coffees, then I will send you a copy of my book. So thank you for those that tuned in live. If you catch us on replay, don't hesitate to leave me or Giles any questions you'd like answers, and obviously just check us out and connect with us if there's something that we can help you with. But until the next episode of the Motivated Business Club, take care of yourself, and we will see you very soon.